Good morning, crime community. I had a little problem signing in again today. I'm just here to read Notes on Poems of 1821 by Mrs. Mary Shelley. My task becomes inexpressibly painful as the year draws near that would seal our earthly fate, and each poem and each event it records has a real or mysterious connection with the fatal catastrophe. I feel that I am incapable of putting on paper the history of those times, the heart of the man aboard of the poet, who could peep and botanize upon his mother's grave, does not appear to me more inexplicably framed than that of one who can dissect and probe past woes and repeat to public ear the groans drawn from them in the throes of their agony. The year of 1821 was spent in Pisa or at the baths of San Giuliano. We are not, as our wont had been, alone. Friends had gathered round us, nearly all dead, and when memory recurs to the past, she wanders among tombs. The genius with all his blighting errors and mighty powers, the companion of Shelley's ocean wanderings, and the sharer of his fate, than whom no man ever existed more gentle, generous, and fearless, and others who found in Shelley's society and in his great knowledge and warm sympathy, delight, instruction, and solace, have joined him beyond the grave. A few survive who felt life a desert since he left it. What misfortune can equal death? Change can convert every other into a blessing or heal its string. Death alone has no cure. It shakes the foundations of the earth on which we tread. It destroys its beauty. It casts down our shelter. It exposes us bare to desolation. When those we love have passed into eternity, life is the desert and the solitude in which we are forced to linger, but never find comfort more. There is much in the Adonis which seems now more applicable to Shelley himself than to the young and gifted poet whom he mourned. The poetic view he takes of death and the lofty scorn he displays towards the culminators as the prophecy on his own destiny, one received among immortal names, and the poisonous breath of critics has vanished into emotions beyond the fame he inherits. Shelley's favorite taste was boating when he lived near the Thames or by the Lake of Geneva. Much of his life was spent on the water. On the shores of every lake or stream or sea near which he dwelt, he had a boat moored. He had latterly enjoyed this pleasure again. There was no pleasure boats on the Arno, and the shallowness of its waters, except in wintertime when the stream is so turbid and impetuous for boating, rendered it difficult to get any skiff light enough to float. Shelley, however, overcame the difficulty. He, together with a friend, contrived a boat such as the huntsmen carry about with them in the Marimena to cross the sluggish but deep streams that intersect the forests. A boat of laths and pitch canvas, it held 3 persons, and he often seemed on the Arno in it, and the horror of the Italians who remonstrated on the danger he could not understand how anyone could take pleasure in an exercise that risked life. The va per la vita, they exclaimed, a little thought how true their words would prove. He once ventured with a friend on the glassy sea of the calm day, down the Arno and round the coast of Leghorn, which by keeping close on shore was very practicable, then returned to Pisa by the canal when missing the direct cut and got entangled among weeds, and the boat upset, and wetting was all the harm done, except the intense cold, and his drenched clothes made Shelley faint. Once I went down with him in the mouth of the Arno, where the stream, when high and swift, met the timeless sea and disturbed its sluggish waters. It was a waste and dreary scene. The desert sand stretched into the point, surrounded by waves that broke idly through perpetually around. It was a scene very similar to Lido, of which he had said, I love all waste and solitary places where we taste the pleasure of believing what we see is boundless as we wish our souls to be, and such was this wide ocean, and this shore more barren than its billows. Our little boat was of greater use, unaccompanied by any danger, when we removed to the baths. Some friends lived in the village of Pugnato, 4 miles away, and we went to and fro to see them in our boat by the canal, which fed by the Sergio. was though an artificial, a full and picturesque stream, made its way under the verdant banks, sheltered by trees that dipped through boughs into the murmuring waters. By day, multitudes of ephemerida darted to and fro on the surface. At night, the fireflies came out among the shrubs on the banks. The cicale at noondays kept up their hum. The azolia cooed in the quiet evening. It was a pleasant summer, bright in all but Shelley's health and inconsistent spirits, yet he enjoyed himself greatly and became more and more attached to the part of the country where chance appeared to cast us. Sometimes he rejected taking a farm situation on the height of one of the near hills, surrounded by chestnut and pine woods and overlooking a wide extent of country, or settling still farther in the maritime Apennines of Mazza. Several of the slighter and finished poems were inspired by these scenes and many of the companions around us. It is the nature of that poetry, however, which overflows from the soul, oftener to express sorrow and regret than joy, for it is then oppressed by the weight of life and away from those he loves, that the poet his recourse of the solace of expression in verse. Still, Shelley's passion was the ocean, and he wished that our summers, instead of being passed along the hills near Pisa, should be spent on the shores of the sea. It was very difficult to find a spot. We shrank from Naples from a fear that the hearts would disagree with Percy. Leghorn had lost its only attraction since our friends who had resided there were returned to England, and Monte Nero being the resort of many English, we did wish to find ourselves in the midst of a colony of chance travelers. No one then thought it possible to reside at Via Reggio, which latterly has become a summer resort. The lowlands and the bad air of Maramina stretched the whole length of the western shores of the Mediterranean, till broke by the rocks and hills of Spiza. It was a vague idea, but Shelley suggested an excursion to Spiazza to see whether it would be feasible to spend a summer there. The beauty of the bay enchanted him. We saw no house to suit us, but the notion took root in many circumstances, and chained by fatality urged him to execute it. He looked forward this autumn with great pleasure to the prospect for a visit from Leigh Hunt. When Shelley visited Lord Byron at Ravenna, the latter had suggested his coming out together with the plan of a periodical work in which they should all join. Shelley saw the prospect of good for the fortunes of his friends and pleasure in his society, and instantly exerted himself to have the plan executed. He did not intend himself joining in the work, partly from pride, not wishing to have the air of acquiring readers for his poetry by associating it with the compositions of more popular writers, and also because he felt he might feel shackled in the free expression of his opinions. If any friends were to be compromised by those opinions carried even to their outermost extent, he wished to live and die as being in the conviction not only true, but such as alone would conduce to the moral improvement and happiness of mankind. The sale of the work might, meanwhile, either really or supposedly be injured by the free expression of his thoughts, and this evil he resolved to avoid. There we shall leave the poems of 1822 for another day, because there's way too much going on in my life, as I'm sure there is in yours, and we pray for peace again in the world. Like, share, and subscribe, and have a nice day.